Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film The President Vanishes from 1934. And this continues my quest to review as much of the filmography of William A. Wellman as I possibly can. I've talked a lot about pre-code films during this Wellman series, and Wellman directed a lot of pre-code films. And after the code came in, I really haven't had a negative example of when the code was set into place until I really saw this movie. This is an example of a film that has no real interesting characters, can't really do anything too dangerous to anyone in the film since they're all playing public officials, and that was against the Hays Code. So you can't really do very much with The President Vanishes. It's not a film that's really going to have any fun with its characters at all because you can't. And even though it might have an interesting concept of the president possibly being kidnapped right before he's supposed to declare war and how he doesn't want to declare war, and this fascist organization called the Gray Shirts are involved, there's a lot of reasons this movie could be good, but it just feels like no one's heart was really in it, and they couldn't really put their heart in it because there wasn't really anything to put their heart in, because none of these characters would be good no matter how good of an actor you had in there. There's been a lot of talk about the Hays Code, and people say, oh, well, when the code came in, it just made them be more creative. And it's like, to a certain extent, I agree that part of what makes some films great are the sacrifices they had to make and how that ended up helping the story. But I've never entirely agreed with that in terms of the Hays Code, and this film especially shows, when you read about the book versus the movie, it definitely puts a negative light on the Hays Code and how it was really a hindrance on making a good movie and making a compelling movie. Much rather they make a film that passed the Hays Code and wasn't considered morally indecent or something than have, an actual interesting story that was compelling. Much rather have a terrible movie that offended nobody. President Stanley Craig, who is a fictional president, unless I don't know my presidents very well, but to my knowledge he is. And there is apparently a war brewing in Europe. What this war is, they never talk about what the examples of it were, what the specifics of it, who in Europe was warring, in fact. That would have been nice to know, but they don't get into that at all. So you just know there's a war in Europe. A lot of people in industries and oil and things like that want there to be a war because it'll rebound the economy, this being 1934, which, by the way, was during the Depression. And that is kind of what got us out of the Depression, so they're not entirely wrong about that one. But they really want the president to declare war, and most of Congress and everybody is going to vote for it. And he's going to give his speech later that day, and then suddenly he vanishes. And the country is looking for the president. They assume he has been kidnapped, specifically by this fascist organization called the Gray Shirts. They wear gray shirts, that's why they're called that. Why gray shirts? I don't know, maybe they like them. They definitely want a war to happen, and they want their guy to be president so that they can eventually take over and declare war before the president is found. One of the things that's definitely problematic about The President Vanishes is the code being instated, and it's so much so that no one's actually sure when this film came out. Wikipedia seems to think it was 1934. Other places say 1935, but it was banned in a ton of foreign countries because of the insinuation that one of these countries could be going to war or would go to war, and America would have to get involved, even though it gives seriously no specifics on that end. So I don't entirely understand that controversy. But it's a film that really is completely inoffensive, and I think that is so boring. It was really hard to stay awake. In fact, I had to rewind it at a certain point. It's an exciting film in the sense that Wellman makes exciting sequences. He doesn't make exciting characters, and there's certain sequences that are exciting, but the characters are so blah. In the president's very pious. The only actor I really like in this is Andy Devine, who gives somewhat of a fun performance, but it's a fun performance in a very boring movie. And the code really came down hard on this film. I assume they were developing it before, although the book came out a few months before this movie did, so I don't know how before the code they were developing it. And it was obviously critical of the president and politicians at the time because America really didn't want to get involved in a war between World War I and World War II. This should be kind of a niche, cool, fun movie, and when I started watching it, I go, oh, there's this gray shirt thing, like the president's getting kidnapped, what's going on with this? But it just never really had any more fun with the concept. And probably because I don't think anyone involved in it really believed in it as much. You know, Wellman's very good at making social issue pictures. He had a year before with Heroes for Sale, with Wild Boys of the Road. He was making a lot of issue pictures, and those were pictures he believed in. And you can tell the filmmaking's a lot more there in those cases. And in this film, I don't really see it as much. It feels like he's trying to get it to work best he can, but he has to make a movie under certain parameters. And I think when you have a studio director, when they understand the rules, they're not going to try to break out from them. They're going to work within them. And I feel like the rules were too rigid this time. There was just no excitement with this film. Kind of boring. All the characters are rather flat, and they're not really interesting. They apparently changed the vice president from being like vain and a drunk and things like that in the book. And same with the characters who are trying to find the president, but also that the actors aren't that great. And on top of that, it's switching between so many different characters. It's hard to keep up who's with what and with who, and like, why is this with this thing? And you're like, oh my god, like, who am I supposed to follow at this point? Like, did someone kidnap him or not? Like, I can't figure it out because I'm trying to keep track of who all these people are. There's no one you definitely follow throughout to follow you through the narrative. It's not very well written. It probably is one of my more least favorite Wellmans I've ever seen. I think Across the Wide Missouri and Buffalo Bill are kind of like my de facto answers, but this is certainly on the bottom of the list. It just doesn't showcase Wellman at all. It shows him trying to get it to work, and there's certain sequences. There's like a sequence where the car is driving and cutting between the gray shirt headquarters and this car chase, and that is a great sequence. And there's certain sequences that he makes, like voting in a room on a certain issue, exciting the way it was cut together. Although that might be because of the editor, which was I think Hanson T. Fritsch, or at least that's who was credited, rather than Wellman. But I know Wellman shot things in a way that you had to kind of cut it that way or it wouldn't work. And most people would just do that in a one shot, but he didn't. And it shows that he was trying to get it to work. But I don't think there was a way to get this film to work. There were no parameters to get The President Vanishes to be an interesting movie, because there was so much going against it in so many different ways. When they say a good movie has all these things going for it at the same exact time, this seems to be a film that had all the wrong things going for it at the wrong time, where you have the Hays Code, where you have an uninteresting script, where you don't have someone to get you through the narrative, where you don't have actors that are that captivating or interesting. It hurts the movie on so many different capacities, and there's so much in this movie that should be good. And I think if someone were to have done it maybe a year or two before, this could have been a really cool movie. And this shows, you know, there was definitely a political movement at the time that didn't like America not going to war. Of course, now we go to war all the fucking time, so I guess it worked out for those guys. At the time, we were very isolationist. There were people who were against that, and this is a film that definitely goes into that. I kind of wanted this to be a fun example of a certain political ideology and a time. Maybe it is. For a sociological example, sure, I guess. But as a movie, it's not that entertaining and it's not that fun. There's certain films that you're like, why is that unavailable? That's pretty good. I like that. This is one where I'm like, I kind of get it, because the code really stepped in and mucked it up and made it uninteresting. Any little bits that would have made this film a little better, the Hays Code stopped. The script sucked to begin with. It's not like it was a good script that was hindered by the code. It wasn't a good script. There's too many things to go against it. I think Wellman did a decent enough job, but you can tell his heart's not into it, which is surprising because this is right out of his pre-code period, where he was really just making phenomenal picture after phenomenal picture, particularly like 33, 34, and did like Looking for Trouble and Call of the Wild was after this, and none of those films are things I really especially like, but this is one you can tell he just did as an assignment picture, that he did certainly for the money and just to do, but it wasn't one he really sunk his teeth in and had some fun with. There's nothing really that interesting about this picture. I can understand why The President Vanishes vanished. It's probably one of the worst Wellmans, not because it's offensive in how inoffensive it is, it's just bland in how uninteresting it is, and it's not very exciting. And for a film that's supposed to be about a kidnapped president and cults and isolationist views on war, it's rather boring. I kind of wish it could have been that weird kind of post-code 30s political movie, but it's not the politics, it's not very interesting. So if you have seen The President Vanishes and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And check out my William Wellman review playlist. The annotation will be below. I've reviewed over 50 William Wellman films, and you can click on that annotation and check those out if you're a fan of William Wellman. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.